As beautiful as a snowy landscape can be, for many railways, a thick blanket of snow is often viewed less as pretty and more as a pain. It takes a vast amount of machinery and manpower to keep the rails clear, and a considerable amount more to free a train that gets stuck, as the Southern Pacific found out in 1952. The winter of 1951 to 1952 was one of the harshest the west coast of America had seen in a long time. Record amounts of snow fell and buried California, causing many roads and railways to work around the clock to remain operating. On the 11th of January, a streamlined diesel-hauled City of San Francisco passenger service departed from Chicago, destined for Oakland, California. As the journey would take a few days and this was the pinnacle of rail travel in the US, the train was made up of Pullman coaches and had sleeping quarters, a bar, a club carriage, and a restaurant that served passengers 3 square meals a day. Aboard was 106 sleeping car passengers, 90 riding in the coaches, and between 30 to 40 staff members keeping the service going. The service became delayed and had to travel along an alternate line because of the heavy snowfall blocking the tracks, but otherwise was traveling well until a few days later on the 13th when it reached Yuba Pass, 17 miles west of Donner Pass in the Sierra Nevada. There, traveling downhill, drifted snow built up in front of the locomotive until it couldn't push through any further. Realizing they weren't going to make it through, the driver tried to reverse the train back up the line, but the ice and buildup of snow trapped the train in place. Accepting that they were stuck, Roadmaster J.T. Fulbright wrapped up warm and walked the rest of the way to Yuba Pass to get help. Once he arrived and made the call, cab forward steam engine number 4188 with a rotary plow was dispatched from Emigrant Pass up ahead to rescue the stranded train. It cut its way through the drifts and passed the train, with the intention of changing lines and backing down to pull the service back up the hill the way it came. Once the snow was clear enough, 4188 coupled up to the carriages and attempted to pull them. 4188 made a valiant effort, but the weight of the train combined with the slippery rails and the fact it was trying to move uphill was too much. During an attempt, the air pump on the plow failed, and as a result, 4188 and its crew were now stuck in the snow too. As the evening closed in, an additional engine, number 4245, equipped with plow, was dispatched from Norden Pass to keep the line next to City of San Francisco clear. It passed by the stranded train before coming back and clearing the line directly in front of the diesel. As the snow had started to build up and drift around the carriages, it was going to take more power to pull it free. So 4245 left the train with the intention of returning the next day with workers and another engine to help dig it out and pull it to safety. The passengers meanwhile were anxious but remained calm. The diesel locomotive was providing light and heat, they still had food and drink, and they could see the plow trains pass by on the other line, so they knew that help was on its way. The train staff cleared snow from the windows and made sure the passengers were all right. To pass the time, passengers made conversation, a card expert taught people how to play bridge, and a salesman aboard organized a small talent show. One passenger recounted, "We laughed and played games, making bets how long it would take the snow to build up on the outside of the windows." Dr. Walter Rohill and 5 other qualified nurses who happened to be passengers provided medical assistance to anyone who needed it, with Dr. Rohill forbidding anyone from drinking alcohol as he needed the gin to sterilize his needles. With the conductor and trainmaster keeping passengers informed of the rescue operations, the passengers seemed to have a very pleasant, albeit slightly anxious night. The next day, Monday the 14th, the blizzard continued while 4245 and its plow marched east back up the line, clearing the way for another rescue attempt. About halfway, however, it was brought to a stop by a large snowdrift. Nobody was hurt, but 4245 couldn't go any further. With the line ahead of the train now blocked, a third engine equipped with plows both front and back was dispatched from Norden to clear the lines behind the train. However, this too became stuck, and tragically, while stood outside inspecting the situation, engineer Ronald R. Raymond was killed when an avalanche came down and overturned one of the plows, burying him beneath it. Now with the line from both ends completely blocked off, the passengers were truly stranded. On top of this, the diesel locomotive had ran out of fuel, and the passengers had lost their lighting. 4188, which was still attached to the train, took over heating duties for the rest of the day, with the coal-burning kitchen stoves heating up soups and coffee, while a few of the sleeper carriages still had their propane-fueled generators to keep them warm. By this point, the situation was beyond anything the railway could do, and so efforts were made to clear the highway that followed close to the line as a means of getting to the train. In the meantime, local volunteers and railroad workers did their best to keep the passengers safe. The Mexican section crew shoveled snow clear of the windows to provide ventilation, and ensured the doors to the mail carriage were clear as it was the only means of entering or exiting the train. Local ski instructor Dennis Wiles put together a volunteer team to deliver food, medicine and blankets to the train. A footnote that I feel I have to mention is that Dennis Wiles was actually George Gartner, a former German prisoner of war. He escaped from his camp after the war had ended to avoid being repatriated to his hometown, which was at that point part of communist Poland. Not only did he help the passengers, but the press also took a picture of him and his group and published it in Life magazine, while at the same time the FBI had been looking for him for 5 years, with wanted posters for him still in most post offices. The best part is, even with his picture in the paper, nobody caught him. He continued to live in hiding until the 1980s when he came clean to his wife and went public. But that's a story for another day. That night, some passengers huddled up to keep warm while others chose to stay in their gas-heated sleeping compartments. At midnight, when a worker went to check on the passengers, they came stumbling back saying something was wrong. It's unknown if a gas pipe had broken or if the carriage exhausts had become blocked with snow, but regardless, some of the sleeper cars had started to fill with carbon monoxide. The doors of the compartments were quickly broken open and the sleeping passengers were woken up, with the doctor ordering them to walk around and get some fresh air before going back to sleep. Luckily, the gas problem was dealt with and nobody was seriously hurt, but it did mean the heaters in the sleeping cars could no longer be used. By the next day, the 15th, work was underway assembling supplies and clearing the roads that led to the stranded train. Workers and a doctor arrived at the site via dog sleds and snowcat with more supplies, and got to work digging. The sleds took away 4 passengers in critical condition, while a helicopter arrived with more food and medicine, though high winds meant it couldn't land. Reporter Art Harper and photographer Ken McLaughlin walked 4 miles along the line to take pictures of the scene and interview the passengers, with Harper later going to a nearby lodge to use the phone to report the story while McLaughlin stayed to help the passengers. That night, the steam heating finally gave out, and passengers resorted to wrapping themselves with tablecloths and curtains in addition to their blankets to try and keep warm. Some even put pillowcases over their heads to fend off the cold. Worse still, the cold had frozen the plumbing in most of the carriages, causing the drains and toilets to back up. This, combined with the lack of ventilation thanks to all the snow blocking the windows, led to the air in the carriages becoming quite stale, foul-smelling and damp. Harper returned the next day, the 16th, to find the weather much clearer and the passengers still calm, albeit getting more and more desperate to leave. Later that morning, the section crew came down once again, and began walking up and down from the tracks to the road, treading a safe path from one to the other. By early noon, road snowplows had finally made their way to the train, and the slow process of moving passengers and tired train staff from the carriages to awaiting automobiles began. Trucks were loaded with the passengers' luggage and all were taken to Nyack Lodge for the night. The next day, a train arrived to take the passengers the rest of the way to Oakland, where they were met by awaiting family members and the press. All the passengers came out fine in the end, with Southern Pacific giving each passenger a letter thanking them for their fortitude and cooperation, and sending every female passenger a rose. Apparently, none of the passengers sued. The train, meanwhile, didn't quite get out as easily. The wheels of the engine and carriages were frozen to the rails where the heat had melted the snow, and the water subsequently turned to ice. 4188 proved even more of a challenge, as any remaining water in its boiler, cylinders, or any other pipes would have been frozen solid, not to mention the layer of ice that would have built up around its wheels in motion, requiring time be spent either chipping away at the ice or melting it away with high-pressure steam or fire. This also included 4245 and the other plow engine that was stuck on the pass too. It took the railroad 3 days to finally get City of San Francisco unburied and thawed out enough for a rescue engine to tow it to the nearest workshop for repairs. Despite the passengers and crew getting out unscathed, the efforts to rescue them still cost lives. As well as Raymond, the engineer killed in an avalanche, Pershing J. Gold, a worker who'd been flat out restoring power to nearby residents, maintaining railroad switches, and helping deliver supplies to the stranded train, died of a heart attack shortly after the rescue was complete, the cause of which was believed to have been the stress of his non-stop efforts to help. Let this story be a reminder that, as scenic as it is, snow can be very punishing even on those who are prepared for it. So if you ever find yourself needing to travel in such adverse conditions with no available detour, maybe just turn around and wait for it to blow over, because it's certainly better than being stuck in it. Subscribe for more.